Recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Crenshaw, for 5 minutes for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to all our witnesses for being here. Critical minerals are the backbone of a modern economy and a modern military, from semiconductors to advanced weapon systems. But today, the U.S. imports between 50% and 82% of the critical minerals we need. So where are they coming from? It's been mentioned plenty of times here. They're coming from China. That's not good. Our national security, our national industrial base, our economic future, dependent on supply chains we don't control from regimes we cannot trust. And why? Well, mostly because our laws and regulations have made it virtually impossible to open up new mines in this country. And even when we do mine, we still have to ship the raw materials overseas just to get them refined because we've offshored our processing capabilities. I want to commend the Trump administration for taking some meaningful steps to address this with executive action. The executive order on critical minerals was a step in the right direction by cutting red tape, but we need to codify this. This is Congress's responsibility, and we're behind. You know, China didn't dominate this space by accident. It's a long game, decades of strategic investments in resource-rich nations across Africa, Asia, Latin America. In 2023, China was the top supplier for 29 out of the 50 critical minerals identified by the U.S. Geological Survey. So that's what it looks like when a global adversary plays chess and we're still playing checkers. And I think it's time we act serious about this, start securing our supply chains, rebuilding our refining capacity, and cutting the red tape that's left us dependent and vulnerable. I might add, I think this is becoming more of a bipartisan issue. I think everybody starts to realize we need these critical minerals. My first question for Mr. Hammond, can you explain how one of the problems we have is there's a lot of radical environmental groups holding up critical mineral mining and related infrastructure projects throughout the court system. I mean, it's not just critical mining. Sometimes it's an off-ramp of a highway. How could we address that?
So that's a incredible issue that you brought up, and it's a huge problem. I spoke earlier about judicial reform. What happens is you can go through, as we've talked about earlier, decades-long process to get a mine off the ground. It could be approved by an agency, but a unfriendly environmental group can drop in, file litigation, and tie that same project up for additional years or kill it altogether. Capital only has, can wait around for only so long before it goes to another place. So that's just one way that they have in their toolbox to kill our progress on mining.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure it would be in our jurisdiction for judicial review, but are there any particular bills that come to mind that seek to fix this problem that we should be aware of? So
over the years, I think likely a judiciary, but also at natural resources, they've looked at what's called EJA reform. Basically, under EJA, you can file litigation, then go to the judge, and he can award you attorney's fees at the end. So we're basically, as a federal government, financing litigation against ourselves.
Huh. That doesn't make sense. What about unworkable environmental regulations that affect investment decisions for companies looking to develop domestic critical mining production or mineral production?
Sure. So if you are a company that's looking to get involved in this business or expand operations in this country, it's fairly intimidating to look down the barrel of the regulations that we've set forth. So what I think the solution is giving consistent and early guidance to companies what the federal government is going to require to get through a permitting process. An investor recently told me that if you want to unleash hundreds or billions of dollars in mining in the near future, tell a company that you're going to do an EIS in a year, not 4 years, and then they'll get really interested, and money will start to flow.
Yeah. Just as a general question, I mean, do we have those resources here in the United States that are just untapped?
Yes. I think we spoke about that a little bit sooner, but yes, we have abundant critical minerals in this country. I think in the state of Utah alone, we have 40 out of 50 critical minerals. So now look at California, Arizona, and so on and so on. We have the potential here.
Yep. I think it's important to keep in mind that we can't have a piecemeal segmented process. We need to have the mineral extraction, the processing, and the energy all at the same time, or else we're not doing what we actually need to do to create the integrated supply chain.
Well, that kind of gets to my next question. In my limited time for Ms. Sweeney, China actively pursuing all these projects around the world. They have the full supply chain that you just mentioned. Is there any example in the United States where we have a full supply chain for any critical mineral?
Beryllium comes to mind, mined in Utah, processed in various facilities that are all under Materion Natural Resources.
So perhaps that case study requires more of our attention, how we did that, and maybe we can be replicated. I'm out of time. I yield back. Thank you.